Hello, magnificent human beings. My name is Landon with Yoga New Mexico, where we focus on empowerment, alignment, and strength. You are in the right place, capable and strong. What are we doing today? It is a short educational piece on Trikonasana, triangle pose. So if you would like a block, go ahead and grab one. If not, that's cool too. So please roll out your mat, and I will roll the intro screen. Thank you all for being here. It is time to look at triangle pose Trikonasana. Now, there are a lot of folks who unfortunately do this pose just terribly. And we really kind of need to keep things back in better alignment. Now, I understand there's kind of a whole idea of getting into your hip in this posture, and then there's an idea of, getting that lengthening from your side. We're going to kind of explore lots of different things. So typically getting into this pose, you come into it from Warrior 2. Now there's other ways to come into this posture, but this is kind of one of the more common ones. So you're in that Warrior 2, right? Knee stacked on top of that ankle, and then your heel in line with that back arch. And hips are as square as you can make them. Now, I think oftentimes we'll cheat and take a bigger Warrior 2, and then you have this hip kind of flaring open. And so Warrior 2 and triangle have a lot of the same principles in that you really do want to keep your hips as square as you can. So from your Warrior 2 stance, then you straighten that front knee. Now, straightening it means keeping it straight. It doesn't mean relaxing and hyperextending like into this joint here. So just keep a nice straight leg. And where a lot of folks go wrong, and why I say we do this so terribly, is that a lot of people start to dip this hip as they come down. And so they're doing this strange, almost hunching method where they're starting to maybe bend this back knee too, and just having kind of poor form. So to prevent this, really keep your hips square and flush. And then right hand, just relax it on down. Relax that hand just on the inside of your leg here. And then you want to hinge like up and out. So instead of just dipping down, you really want to create that lengthening through your rib cage here. Okay, so one of two kind of schools of thought here is hand on the inside or hand on the outside. And I have seen both where, you have your hand on the inside for your triangle, or you have your hand on the outside. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. And what I mean by that is that you should have enough body awareness to understand whether or not you're going to put your hand on the left or the right side in terms of what your hips are doing and what your shoulders are doing. So I can bring my hand all the way down to the mat on the inside and have my shoulders kind of square and my hip dipping out, or this side, which is almost even kind of worse. But if you can really open it up and square those shoulders and reach that hand up and keep your hand on the outside and keep this hip back, then you're good. So honestly, you put your hand on the inside or the outside of your foot, it doesn't really matter. What more matters is paying attention to that sensation of lengthening out of your hip, lengthening through your rib cage, and that is one of the bigger kind of points. Now, there can be a strength element to this pose when you don't rest your hand and you don't use a block. So my hand's not on the block, and I'm keeping things nice and square, and I'm trying to hinge down, as much as I can, but still keeping my hand straight. and I'm not really resting this hand. It's just kind of like laying here. So that's kind of like the choose your own adventure portion of yoga, right? Like, do you want to have a more intense and strong practice, and really kind of focusing on where you're engaging and keeping this muscle there, and all of those more intense portions of your practice? Or do you simply have your block and you can actually then begin to kind of create a little bit more space here through that hip? So it really just depends on, what you want to do in your triangle. And another great way to get the sensation out of triangle is one of two ways. One is simply, your crescent moon, when you're in your crescent moon and you're tilting to one side or the other, that whole idea of this lengthening from your hip through your rib cage, through your intercostals, all the way up to that armpit, that is definitely present in your triangle pose. And another option is gate pose. So I think honestly gate really just is a modified triangle, and there's going to be somebody in the comments right now that says no, gate is its own pose, it's not a modified triangle, and I agree with you. But you hear folks say in yoga, if you can't do down dog, then modify into tabletop. Well, tabletop's not down dog at all, but it's one of these things of you can modify into a different pose if that pose shares enough similarities, to the one you're actually trying to do. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on gate because we will end up doing gate in another episode. For your gate pose, balancing on that knee and having this leg straight out. Don't ground your foot down, rather keeping your toes pointed up. And same thing with this leg here is don't, sink in and hyperextend that joint. Right hand on the inside of that thigh, left hand up overhead, and then you can slide this hand on down. I just really don't like putting my hand on my leg because it encourages that hyperextension. So if you keep your leg really strong and engage that quadricep, then, you'll be okay. But gently, maybe placing it on your shin wherever, and then you get that same feeling in your gate pose here from lengthening all along. So that is a look at your triangle pose. Few key things to remember. Try not to dip your hip down. Inevitably, I do feel it's going to happen just a little bit, but really try to have the body awareness to keep your hips as square as you possibly can and lengthen, because what's interesting is that you can move your hips by 1/2 of an inch, and all of a sudden now you can bring your hand from a foot away from the ground all the way down to the ground. It's really subtle, these things that happen. So if you bring that hip back by 1 inch, all of a sudden your hand kind of comes back up. So maybe finding again that happy medium of how much you're dipping your hip and then how square you're keeping them. Ideally, try to keep them as square as you possibly can. Thank all of you so much for being here. You are all amazing, brilliant, beautiful human beings. From my heart to all of yours, namaste.